Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle. And this is our final week for January. We read Forever Your Rogue by Erin Langston, and it's so good.
Sad for it to go, but the truth is that there are more things. I think Erin Langston
Yes.
has a bonus chapter that you can get if you join her newsletter.
Mhm.
And there are stories about other members,
Yes.
characters that we've met in this book.
Yeah.
So
So
maybe we
keep
don't have
keep
to
your eye
be.
on that if you get done with this like we have and are excited about more. So we pick up with Nate and the kids playing outside, and Cora is like embroidering this napkin. And Mrs. Carleton is like has snide comments about like, do you not have maids? Why are you embroidering this napkin? Like making a big deal out of it. And Cora's like, oh my
I
God,
mean,
shut
I
up.
kind of thought that embroidery was a genteel pursuit, but apparently, Lady Mrs.
For a
Carlton, because she's not
viscountess,
a
I
lady,
guess.
she
Maybe
doesn't.
like for a debutante, but not for a viscountess. I don't know.
Who knows?
I
Mrs.
mean,
Carlton
nothing
has
Cora,
lots of her own rules that
yeah. And
she
nothing Cora
imposes.
ever does. Like anything that Cora does, she would want the opposite. Like
Yeah.
that's clear. Um, and so Mrs. Carleton says that some important papers have gone missing from her husband, and she's questioning if it's the staff. And of course, Cora knows that they would never. So she's like
She's like,
affronted
my
by the
staff is
idea.
very good and loyal. And she's like, I'm sure, because I'm sure that you are too lenient with them. And it's like, okay.
Again, can't do anything right. And so Cora, she can't take her eyes off Nate and the kids. Like she's just like obsessed with watching them play together. They look exactly like the family she always wanted, and she doesn't really know what to think about that, but also like she can't help herself. So she wants to go like play with them. Um, so Cora's hosting this small soiree at her house, and it is going well. It's just like six or seven couples, dinner and like games, whatever. It's not like a full ball or whatever.
There's a thing that she hasn't done in a while. Well, first of all, she couldn't do it while she was like in mourning.
Right.
And but even before that, she and her husband had not hosted anything since Tess was born.
Yeah.
And like he also wasn't like fun anyway.
No, he's horrible.
So
Yeah. So
like
it
she's
wouldn't have been the same thing at all if they had done it. Yeah.
this is the first time that she's doing this like with Nate, and
Yeah.
somehow it's like, oh,
It's fun and she likes it.
I do
Yeah.
like this.
So it's going well, until the ladies won all the tea about how her and Nate got together. And one of them mentions like whatever, some mistress that was an opera singer who fled to France. And like another one mentions that he left his sister-in-law's ball with another widow the night before she met with him back in the summer. Back
The day that
in,
he came and had like the black eye or whatever, that,
yeah. And
it's
she's like,
interesting.
God, I don't want to hear this. She is feeling petty. She is feeling
Well,
jealous.
she like walked in on the conversation and they
Yeah.
all got real quiet,
Mhm.
but she was like, who are you? Because who are you talking about? Who should
Yeah.
you? And so then I think it feels like what happened is they were all gossiping about her, but then once she went in there and she opened the door for questions,
Hmm.
they were like, well, I I wouldn't want to pry, but
But yes, I
I
do.
definitely need to ask you, how did you meet? Why would
Yeah.
like how did this ever happen? And then of course they start saying all the things they know about him. It sucks because like Cora's husband was running around
Was a
with opera
philanderer.
singers
Yeah.
and doing it's not like he was acting
Any different than, yeah.
great,
Yeah.
and he was married and had commitments.
Yeah.
So
And Nate's single. Yeah.
but she's got her eye on Mrs. Carlton. I keep
Yeah.
trying to call her lady and she
Yeah.
is not.
She is no lady.
Anyway, yeah, she keeps looking at Mrs. Carlton because she's like absorbing. She's like, I know she's absorbing
Yes,
any negative thing,
of course.
and I don't want to hear this. And it just kind of
Yes.
sucks.
And
But of
so it's
course,
like she's mad because she is feeling petty, she's feeling jealous, and she doesn't feel like she can feel those things because Nate is not her husband, and she is mad about it.
this was before they even had reunited,
Yeah.
but also like, ew. And
Yeah.
this might cause a problem because that lady, if there's a way to
Right.
cause a
Exactly.
problem, anyway.
So Nate comes by and she walks out in the hallway to talk to him, and they're, kind of short with each other. He realizes that, why she's upset, even though
Immediately
she
sees a
doesn't say
problem when
why.
he, yeah.
Yeah. And she says something to him like, I don't really know you. Like this is only you've only been here 3 weeks or what 2 weeks, whatever. Like, I don't really know you. And he's like, still, you don't know me. Like you still can say that to my face. Like, give me a break, right? And
Mhm.
after all this time that we've spent together, after how I've had your back, like you don't know me. Okay, you know? So they have to go play this parlor game. They're both mad. They're both out of sorts. She gets blindfolded and has to like touch the face of someone and see if she can tell who it is. And
And it's the parlor game, like she's not the first player, so she has to watch other people. And
yeah,
Nate is in the lineup because it's like the ladies touch the men
right.
and they have to take their gloves off. And it's,
Mhm.
and she's just like, ugh. Nate is staying at the back of the line when it's other people, but
Yeah.
then she's blindfolded and she immediately.
Yeah. Immediately she knows it's him. And she realizes not only does she know him from touching his face, she knows him. Like what she just said was crap. Like she knows him. And she knows him in a way that none of these other people in this house do, even if they've known him for longer. And
Of
and so
him.
that's
Like
like a
they
big
might know all the
epiphany for
gossip
her.
about him,
Yeah.
but she
They don't
knows
know
like
him.
who he is and what his heart is. And like
Yeah.
anyway, she talks herself down from the ledge herself this time.
Yes.
Yay,
Yes.
Cora.
Very impressive. Yes. So in bed early in the morning, he's thinking about everything that he's missed, like from Cora and the kids' lives while he was out wasting his own life, basically, is how he thinks of it now. Um,
So you noticed, I mean, I feel like in our last episode,
yeah.
when we talked about like the dogs scaring Tess,
Mhm.
like from then and maybe slightly before, like he thinks of those babies as his babies.
Yes.
And it's so when he's thinking, it's almost like he's thinking that like he missed a part of his children's, like, almost like,
Lives.
oh, I
Yeah.
was away and I missed when my babies were doing, and it's really kind
Yes.
of sweet
It really
because
is. Yeah. It is. He's
anyway.
becoming a dad.
Yeah, and well,
Um,
and before this, like obviously he wasn't somebody who like, and people don't think of him as someone who like has that in him,
yeah.
and
Well, and
yet
his sister-in-law did say to Cora when they ran into each other at that ball, like, I always said he would be a good dad. Like, didn't I,
not a
girls?
good husband
Like,
necessarily, but he'd be a great dad.
yeah.
That's what people have
And
said.
this and her daughters are like, everybody thinks that, mom. Like, you're right. Yeah. And so yeah, that's all been sort of percolating around from the beginning. But yeah, so Nate decides he needs to study these laws to understand like what they're really up against with this whole thing with the Carltons. And so he's down in the library looking at this book. Cora comes in and she's like, everybody's gone. And he's like, oh, okay. So they do it in the library. And uh,
The
there's,
way I
as an
was
aside, because it's in between chapters here, there's another letter, and his letters are getting swoonier, progressively swoonier again. And it's just like wonderful. And so then you really get into the thick of them being together in the library, and it is fire.
expecting somebody to walk in or some Carlton person to like come back early. I I mean, I should just, if you haven't gotten to this point, I'm sorry,
Whew.
spoilers and all, but
No.
like, don't worry, just enjoy it.
Enjoy it. They are on the
Cora
library
is very
ladder, and it is
meticulous in her planning. Don't
fire.
doubt her. It's fine.
Fire. But it
My-
is like too much emotionally for Cora. Like she starts like crying. And he's like, "Oh my God, like what's going on? Like was I too rough? Like what happened?" And she's like, "No, I'm just so upset that I can't forget what's breathing down my neck even here with you. Like this is like it's becoming untenable, you know?" And it's she's like basically what I'm facing down is a lifetime without my kids and like I don't know how I'm going to do that. And he tells her about losing
It's
his mom.
interesting that she says is that she is like, I will survive because at some future time,
Yes, they'll be
when
grown.
they need me and they're
Yep.
free to come find me, like I need to be here and I will be here for them.
Yeah.
But
But I don't
like
know how I'm going to
the
last in between. Yeah.
yeah, I was that was
It was
oh,
heartbreaking. And he tells her about losing his mom young. He was like 7, I think. And how he still felt her with him, and how he still thought about the things that she had taught him, and like, and he's like, and you won't be alone. Like, you'll have me, basically. And he says, I love you
Kind
without
of tells her
condition.
like they will be strong enough to deal with this because they're your kids.
Yeah.
So they're gonna, I mean, like he really says all the best things.
All the best things. And he says, I love you without condition, even if you don't say it back. Like, and she in that moment can't say it. She's still just so scared of everything that's maybe about to happen that she can't bring herself to do it. But she loves him too. Like, it's clear. So Nate and the kids are playing pirates while they're reading this book about pirates, and Tess gets hurt.
Sanctioned reading.
Tess gets hurt. She hurts her wrists. Everyone's in a bit of a panic because she does that like silent cry, which any parent recognizes as like the doom of death when
Is
somebody
very
gets
bad.
hurt. It's really bad. And so uh the Carltons, of course, make everything worse as usual. They announce that they're
They're
leaving in the
playing
morning
there. He's reading, and he's reading like a history book about
about
pirates.
pirates. Yeah,
They're reenacting, and then Cora goes to get something. She steps out of the room, and Nate looks down
at the
to
book.
like find his spot. And in the like
5 seconds.
that it takes him to find the like spot where he'd finished reading, Tess has stood up, tried to do something. Her brother like does a tease or whatever, and she falls off the chair.
And breaks her
Nobody knows
wrist.
what happened though, because
Yeah,
he looked down and
because
he looks up,
she's silent crying, and like nobody knows what happened.
and
And Leo's crying too.
Leo is like, it was an accident. I'm so sorry. And now he's upset because
Yes,
he is like, I did this.
right.
But he's in the way. So Cora comes in, they call the nanny. It's like
It's a
it turns
whole
into a huge
hullabaloo.
kerfuffle.
Yes. So of course the
Um,
Carltons show up to make it worse.
of course.
And they're like, pirates, like as if it's like the worst thing in the world that they could have done is like read to these babies about pirates. Like, give me a
History
freaking break.
book, a history book about pirates. And they were like, she was like, what other like immoral
Right,
things have
like
you been
what's next?
teaching? And
Yeah.
it's like,
It's absurd. And so she finally is like, this is it. Like, we've had enough. We are leaving in the morning, and we expect the kids delivered to us in London within a fortnight.
she's like long enough because asks like sends for a lady who is a mother of like 25 boys, and
A
she's like
farmer down the
clearly
road.
she
Yeah.
will know how to deal with
Yeah.
something like this, and recognize if it's like, and Mrs. Carlton's like, we need to send for a
With a
surgeon, and
surgeon.
she's like, a surgeon. She fell
She
anyway.
said, so she can bloodlet my 2-year-old baby? Like, you're insane. We're not doing that.
Right. So it just becomes a big thing. But Mrs. Carlton, it's very interesting. She's not trying to take a hurt baby. She's like,
No, not at all.
we'll give you enough time so she's fully recovered
In two
until you bring
weeks.
her to me.
In 2 weeks, even though
Um,
you think she needs a surgeon, you idiot. And also Cora has to find a dower house because they're basically like, well, if we're taking the kids, we're taking the house, is kind of like what she says. And so it's horrible. And so Nate is
and the
pissed.
thing is that Nate is like, he's just like, you
He's
know
so
what?
pissed.
The thing with Nate that's interesting is he's watching Leo. He's like, Leo's already feeling guilty, and now there's all
Yes.
this stuff.
He
And
shouldn't be
Cora is
hearing
not
this.
standing up for herself, and he is
Yes.
like, you know what, you. And so he does like step up and try to defend.
Yeah.
But then then Mrs. Carlton is like, we're taking these kids.
Yeah.
And so Cora is just
Just
like she
stop. You're
can't
making
deal.
it
She needs
worse.
to deal with her
Yeah.
kid, not with all
Yes.
this. So she's like, every single person in here who is not
Get your
helping,
kids
get
out.
out.
Yes.
Which, as a person who works in an ICU, I can tell you that is the exact correct response.
Yes,
Like, if you're
absolutely.
not helping, get
Get
out of
out.
here.
Yes, absolutely.
Um,
It's a nightmare come true, this whole scenario. It's exactly what she was dreading and fearing this entire summer. So,
also for Nate, because
yeah.
he's like, wait, I'm trying to help. And she's like, no, you have to leave too.
And she's like, I don't need
Maybe
a
can
third
you take
kid,
care of
is
Leo?
basically what she says to him, which is really harsh, but like I'm sure that's really what she felt like in that moment because he was not helping. And I mean, who hasn't been there?
Yeah. She
So
does take he is like charged with taking care of Leo, which
yeah,
is a very like I mean, I think to me in reading, I'm like obviously she still trusts him. She's
yes,
still
of
like it's
course.
not like she's saying
Get out of here and don't
you
come back. Yeah. Yeah, no,
but
she has to deal with the wrist. Her daughter's still upset. Leo's upset. So Nate takes Leo to the nursery. They're kind of playing dominoes, whatever, they're talking. And Leo asks him, "Are all men Viscounts?" And he's like, "No."
first he says like I guess I'm a really bad brother, aren't I? And I
Yeah.
was not ready. Like that was
Yeah, I
so
cried and
Nate's
it was really emotional, their conversation. It really was. It made me cry. Extra star for that PS. If you make me cry, it's on. But yeah, he says like I guess I'm not a good brother, and he's like, no, you're an awesome brother, and like I know because I have a brother too. And he asks like, I guess I'm gonna be a Viscount, and he's like, yeah, and he's like, are all men Viscounts? And he's like, no. And then he says something like, do we all have to be like our fathers? And
says
Nate,
that all men like their fathers and he and like do well grow up to be like our fathers and Nate's like well kind of like the Viscount thing like
not necessarily.
sometimes yes sometimes no.
Yeah. And and it's really, oh God, it's the
Leo
sweetest moment.
says I think it would be good if I'm not
Yeah.
and I was just like oh
And then he
no
says, maybe I'll be like you. And Nate is like, in that moment, he thinks you should have been mine. Like all of you should have been mine. And it made me cry. I cried for like 5 minutes. It
right
was
now
so
being
sad.
like oh no
Like Leo is his son. In that moment, he knows for sure, like this is it for him. And so Nate needs to make this all right. Like no matter what the cost to him, like he has to fix this. So he goes down to carry Tess to bed after they've kind of like knocked her out with some laced tea. And Cora's like chattering on about her plans, like, oh, I think we can do this, we can do that, like as he's trying to like put Tess to bed. And he knows he needs to tell her now, like about what he's started to try to set in motion. But Cora is not ready to talk. She needs him. She needs to be in charge. That's really what she needs because all of this stuff is out of her control and it's making her feel like crazed. And so they go to his room. She takes charge. It's pretty fire, but of course, no talking happens again. So in the morning, she wants to go check on the kids. She wants to leave him a note because it was really kind of profound the night before between them, and she doesn't want to just like not be there when he
one
wakes
in the
up and not
morning
say
yeah.
anything. Yeah,
Also, they didn't, she knows that he wanted to say something to her and that
yeah,
she didn't really allow for the conversation that
yeah.
needed to happen. And she knows that, well, I don't think she knows what he needed to tell her,
No,
but she knows that a conversation needed to happen
yeah,
because before, you know, like when Tess got hurt, a lot happened that
right,
probably they needed to hash out anyway.
yeah.
And she knows that it would be like bad for for him to wake up and it's like she
She's
just
not
like
there. So she goes, she's going to write him a note and she goes into his bedside table. Well, she remembers the night before, one of the things she was chattering on about was like, you did write those letters for me, right? Like you said you would. And he's like, yeah,
that
they're
was
in my
probably
bedside
like the
table.
third time she's asked him about it on the
Yes.
page.
And he's
Um,
very like, he's very sketchy about it, she thinks, like every time that she's asked about
I
it.
mean, we have read some of those letters, so we
Right,
know that he's probably kind of feeling a little shy about what he put in there.
right.
But to her, she's like, I don't know, he might maybe he didn't write them, and that's just him trying to like skirt around the issue.
And so she's all in her head about that as she's like going into the bedside table. And she has to be sure now at this point. She's talked herself into it. She's worked herself all up. He's not awake to talk her down. So now this is happening. So she goes in the drawer. She
And
sees,
she does think to herself like, ugh,
I should not
I
be
should
doing
not
this.
be going through his stuff. But
She can't stop herself once she's started.
like the door's already
So
open.
she sees a bunch of letters. Like there's some from his brother, there's some from Tabby. And then she sees the ledger sheet that's clearly Mr. Carleton's. And she's like, what the hell is going on? So he kind of wakes up as she's like seeing this. And she's like, what is this, Nate? And he's like, "Oh, you're going through my things now? Like, what is happening?" Like he's just woken up. They fight. He explains about his suspicions. She is incredulous that he did not tell her about this already.
Where
And he's like, "I
thing that's
wanted to help."
interesting too is she does try to be like, I was looking for a quilt, and he's like at the bottom of a
At the
drawer, like
bottom of a drawer full of papers, like, no, ma'am. Yeah. And so, I mean, she, he's like, "I wanted to help, but like, you clearly don't trust me and you clearly don't love me. Like, that's like, you haven't said it once. Like, I didn't think it, like, basically, you can tell in this moment, like, he didn't think that really bothered him, but clearly now he thinks it means she doesn't love him because she doesn't trust him. And she's like, "No, that's not true. I do love you." Like, but she's like, "But you hid this from me." And he's like, "Oh, so there is a condition." Like, and so they're going back and forth, and she's not saying anything right. Nate is withdrawing. Like, she can
here's
see it
the
happening.
yeah, she does out loud say, like,
I'm not saying
I
this
am
right.
not saying these things correctly. Like, I'm not saying the way it's coming out is not what I mean,
Yeah.
but she still said them and he still heard it. And I think it's just
And she can see on his face, just like withdrawal is happening. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm losing him." And he basically says to her, like, "I can't, at this point, I can't wait to hear from your brother. Like, I got to take this stuff to London and see him in person, like today." And he's like, and she's like, "Well, no, you can't leave when you're this upset." And he's like, "Oh, so you want me to stay here? So it's not an emergency? Like, you can't have it both ways, basically." And of course, she doesn't really have a choice because it is, in fact, an emergency and her kids are at stake. So she has to just like let him go, even though things between them are terrible. And so
also, though, like, she doesn't know what to say because there's not a good, like, there isn't really a good way for her to, like, she can't prove to him that she trusts him by
she's
making
basically
him
just
stay
proven that
there with her
she
until he
doesn't.
believes it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
it's
so she says, "You'll come back here, won't you?" And he kisses her goodbye and he doesn't answer. And she's too scared to ask again. So we flip to London. It's 2 days later. He meets with her brother, Gavin, over by the bank. Nate needs to pretend to be Charlton.
her brother is also like, it's
He's very like,
clear that her brother is like a male version
of her.
of Cora. Like he walks up and he's like, "You are
"You're late." And he's
late." And
like, "I'm
he's
right on
like,
time."
"I am exactly on time." And he's like, "Yeah, but if we were going to be ready to go in there on time, you should have been here 5 minutes ago." And he's like,
Like, "You should have
"You
said
should have,
that."
if that was the rule, you should have told me
And he
before."
thinks
It
in his head, "Oh my God, there's two of them."
was clearly he's so nervous. They're like in a back alley that's completely empty. And he's
Yes,
like,
nobody's
"Don't
around.
talk about this
Oh my God.
in
So he's showing
public
him the
where anyone."
papers. It is what he thinks it is, but they need proof that it's actually Leo's account that is on
And
this stuff because it's just an account number. It doesn't have a name. So he has to pretend to be Charlton to get a receipt to because the receipt will have the account name on it.
the thing is that, like, okay, so they need proof for themselves because if he puts, like, once he puts
Right.
the legal
Yeah,
apparatus in motion, it, like, there's not going to be a hiding. And
right.
if the number they have, like, if this information they have doesn't prove anything,
They're screwed.
then they're, cat's out of the bag, they're
Yes.
screwed. So so they do decide, like, well, if we go in there
We can
and
find out, but
we
it's
can
fraud
get
and theft.
you can pretend
And he's a
fraudulently and
solicitor, so like that's big bad news for him, not to mention like, in general. So Nate's the one that's gonna have to do it, and he basically just like along for the ride, kind of. So they go in, it all goes well. Nate
did
asks
promise
for
Cora that he would not involve her brother
right
in
in
anything that
whatever.
could get him in trouble too. So
Yes.
there's that.
Yeah, so he's got that in the back of his head too. Yeah. So he goes in, it all goes well. He asks for if he can have receipts from his last like dozen transactions because his solicitor is like changing over his bookkeeping or whatever.
Very funny. He's like, I live out in the country and our banks aren't nearly as good as your bank. So if you could
Right.
give me a list, then I could. And of course, he's like,
Oh,
because
yes,
he's
me too.
charming and he knows how to like work the
Yes,
people.
absolutely.
They
Um,
give him the last like 100,000 transactions or something. Like it's like a whole bunch.
yeah. And so he gives it to him and he hands that to Gavin immediately. So Gavin has all the paperwork info, but then they give him the money. And for a second, he's like, "Oh shit, I didn't really think about
I don't
what
want
I was going to do
this.
with this money. Like, I don't want this money, but I can't deposit it right back, or like they're going to be like, what the hell are you doing?" So he puts it in his pocket. They start to leave. As they're walking away, another teller hears somebody say to him, "Bye, Mr. Carleton," or whatever. And he's like, "Oh, is he back? I helped him yesterday."
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
it's not,
"Oh,
I
fuck."
don't, his name's not Carlton, it's something else, but but it's like he goes, "Oh, he was just here yesterday. I helped. Was there a problem with the
Right.
transaction that we just did?"
Yeah.
And he is like, "Oh no, we got to keep on
Keep
walking."
walking. Yeah.
But they already see, like, it's like he can't walk out of there fast enough. And he
And
sees the guy going, "No, he's little." And he's
he's
just like,
round,
"Well,
whatever. Yeah.
there's no
He's
way
like,
I'm
"Oh,
going to
yeah,
be
the
little and
jig is
round."
up." Right. And so he sees Gavin's close to the door and he's like, "I got to get him out of here. Like, he has to get out of here with those papers." And so when the security guard approaches him, instead of fighting like he normally would, he decides he's gonna give up because it's gonna distract them and Gavin's gonna be able to get away. And
Seems like
so,
Gavin does not really notice what's going on either, though. Like
no, he has no clue. He thinks they're good. He didn't hear all the kerfuffle
he
happening
just,
back
yeah,
there.
he walks out and he thinks that that
Plan
Nate's right behind
accomplished.
him, basically.
Yeah. So for 3 days, Cora has been waiting and wondering and trying to enjoy the little time she might have left with the kids. And then the next day, she's dealing with some correspondence to try to keep her busy when
I guess we should also mention that Tess is fine.
yeah, she's fine. She's already like
She,
recovering. It's only been 3 days. Yeah.
yeah, but Cora's like, "I'm not, like,
Right. I'm not
we're staying
volunteering that
here."
info. Yeah. So Gavin shows up, her brother, and he starts to tell her the good news, assuming Nate has already told her. And Gavin is surprised that Nate is not there, and Cora had no clue like what had happened. And he's like, he should have had a 2 day
He's
head
like, "Oh,
start.
that was sweet of him to like leave the news for me." And then he's like, "Wait, why, where is he?" And
Yeah.
it's like,
Like he's
nobody
not here.
knows.
I don't know
Nobody
anything.
knows.
And so Cora is beside herself. Nate has not come back. But why? And then she's like, but why would he come back? Like I pushed him away at every opportunity. I ruined everything. Like she's distraught. And so she's happy, that things are in motion and that it looks like she might be winning her case, but she's distraught because she thinks Nate is gone for good. So Nate is on basically house arrest at the magistrate's townhouse. The man wrote to Nate's
Feels
brother
like the benefits of being like
of being
rich
titled,
people. Yeah, like this.
or the
I'm
heir
like,
to a
what is
title in
the
his case.
nepo baby equivalent of like not going to jail
Absolutely.
because
Yes.
you're
And so the magistrate wrote to Raymond, but Raymond has not answered, and Nate is afraid he's pushed him too far this time. Like he's just not gonna come.
yeah. He thinks that Nate is like just ignore, like just mad enough that he's
Yeah.
like, "You know what, you sit there and you
And
suffer."
stew in it, right? Yeah.
The thing that's funny is that the magistrate like clearly does not want to bungle this
No.
because of who Nate is and who,
Yes.
because he's the heir, right? Like
Yeah.
his brother does not have any sons.
Yeah.
And so Nate is the heir to this earldom. And so
Yeah.
he's kind of like,
Oh God, what do I
hmm.
do? And he wants the Earl's help, but the Earl is not showing up. So we're back with Cora now, and her housekeeper
It
wants
is kind of funny too, though, because like he is like, "You are a criminal," and his wife, and then he's like, "And my wife wants to know how you like your
like
potatoes for dinner." Like it's just like the way
yes,
he's
it's
trying
so
to be
funny.
so serious, and the
Oh my
way that
gosh.
his whole family is like so excited to have him in their house
Yes, it's
is really kind of
hilarious.
funny.
So Cora's maid, her housekeeper wants to clean all the now vacant guest rooms. And Cora's like, yes, none of them are coming back, but I'm going to check Nate's room first in case. And so she goes in there and she's looking around. The bed's already been made, but like, other stuff hasn't been cleaned up or whatever.
Like cleared out, or like they'd left things how he left them, and
Right.
she is like she's kind of when they ask, she's kind of like not sure at first what to tell them. It's like because she doesn't know, like, is he coming back?
Yeah.
Does he hate me forever? Like, I don't know.
Right.
So she finally decides like, yes, but I should go in there and just make sure that like there's nothing that he would want other people to see or that
Right.
whatever. So she
So she goes in there and she's looking around and she opens his bedside table again, expecting it to be empty. And instead, it's a stack of letters for her. And she reads
it's
them.
like if in my mind they when I read, I was like they're like packed up. Like
Yeah, like it's like
it's
tied with a
clearly
bow for her. Like, yeah, I
yeah.
agree. So she reads them. She's sobbing, but it also makes her realize like he loves her. If he's not here, then something's wrong. Like he would never have just not come back. And so she yells for her butler to stop her brother, who's about to leave to go back to town. And she's like, we need to go too. And she's like, oh, haste. And then she's like, oh God, no, the kids and all her stuff and Annie, like, it can't be haste, right? So she just is like,
Really
we'll just do the best we
realistic
can.
because she's like, we're going right now. And then she's like,
Yes.
oh no,
And
I
then she's
have
like,
children. Nanny, also, make sure he's got his like favorite
yes,
teddy or whatever. Like it just is so funny because
it was really funny.
it
And it's,
feels like
and like,
peak
as a
mom
mom,
to
I
me.
related to that so hard. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it was really, I was like, oh my God, yeah, been there, right? So, Nate is still stuck, but the Earl has finally arrived. He goes in to talk to him and he's expecting to get torn down as usually happens in their conversations, but instead his brother's like, I was out of town, like I have no idea what's going on, what is going on.
He's
And
also kind
so
of like, are you okay? What is this?
right,
And Nate was like, am I okay? Like he's got to recalibrate real quick because this is
yes,
not the
not
conversation he
what
was
he expected to
expecting.
happen at all. Yeah, so he thought his brother was punishing him, but his brother had no idea that he was even in trouble. And so Nate explains everything to him. He and his brother really connect for the first time in years and have like a new understanding between them. And it's really a really nice moment. I cried then
Nate, I
too.
think, is vulnerable in a way that, like, I don't think his brother expected either. Because he's
Yeah,
kind of like, I really need your help.
I
And
need
his
help.
brother's like,
Yeah.
well, good,
Yes, I'm here for
good,
you,
lucky
right?
for
Well,
you.
and it's, I think they're both seeing each other in a new light, which is really important if they want to like have a relationship. And I cried at this part too because it was very emotional. So Cora drops off the kids at the house and she and Gavin go over to see the Earl. He's out.
Yes, we should. That conversation, like, his brother is like, oh, you're a dad now. Like, and it is very like this. I know because this happened to me once too. Like, where
Yeah,
like they're not my kids, but they are my
but
kids.
they are.
And for him, I
Yeah.
guess it was his brother, like they're related, but
Yeah.
it was really sweet that they had that connection
It
over,
was gorgeous.
it
I
was
loved
really
it and it
sweet.
made me cry again. So yeah, Cora good, Gavin go to see the Earl, he's out. But they get to the but Tabby is there, which she wasn't expecting because Tabby doesn't live there anymore.
Abby is usually very helpful. She was
Yes.
not helpful at this moment. She's like, are we sure
No.
he's just not out on a
Right.
bender?
So
He
Cora
does this
tells Tabby
sometimes.
everything like that's been going on for the last month, basically. And she's like, Nate's missing. And Cora's like, I mean, Tabby's like, is he though? Like, this is a thing that he would do. Like, you don't really know this about him, but like, I'm not worried. You know what I mean? And Cora's like, no, you don't know. Like, he would not do this. Like, this is different, right? Cora's not having it. Like, she's not letting anybody tell her that he's just like off gallivanting, right? So the Earl arrives and she dives straight into her explanations before he can even like get a word in. And as she's impassionedly telling the Earl, like, if you don't help me, I'll figure it out myself. And in walks Nate, and he's like, you know, you should listen to her. Like, she really likes being right. And so, of course, she's thrilled to see him. Everybody leaves them alone to talk. She starts apologizing, like right off the bat, and he stops her. And he's like, epic speech by Nate, I have to say. Like, there is some,
Good.
this swoony MFer has some really nice things to say. You guys really need to read this book because it was amazing. Um, and then uh the people come back in and Lord Fordham, his brother, announces that he encouraged the court, he threw his weight around a little bit and encouraged them to like expedite their
Yeah.
review of these papers. He's like, I
And
didn't tell them
basically,
like what to do, but I asked them to like hurry up and do what they're gonna do, basically. Um, which I mean, that's nice to have around. Somebody who's willing to put their power to use for
they
you.
were like, it could be. years before, you know what I mean? It was
Right.
kind of like
Yeah.
it could be weeks or months before they even like
Like look
get
at
to
it.
this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And it was very, they decided that since there wasn't really like the, they
Like if
decided,
they couldn't figure out who the victim was, like in
yeah.
Nate's like crime.
So they did, but they did decide that like it was whoever was representing the
The
Viscount
Viscount.
and the Viscount's interests should be the one who decided who to
Like to
charge and
press
like who
charges or
to be
whatever.
if,
Yeah.
which
And
was nice
so,
because the
yeah,
Viscount was being swindled and this crime, I'm saying crime, but it was a
it
crime,
was a crime. Yeah.
was done in like to try to help him. So like
Right.
that does kind of
Yes.
feel like justice.
And so he encouraged the court to expedite the review of the custody dispute in order to settle these criminal matters with Nate. And now she and Gavin are the guardians of the kids, and the Carltons are out. Like they're done. And
And they did
so
tell us in the beginning that normally it would be like
it would be her brother.
the it would be her brother because he has no stake.
Right. He cannot
Um,
inherit from the estate or whatever.
he can't, yeah, he can't inherit anything from from this
Yes,
situation. So
which
it
is what's
is,
supposed to make it like safe and that people aren't going to take advantage of it. And clearly, you that's
well,
not always
but
true.
the the Viscount's sister's husband.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like technically, if they had kids and something happened to
They
like
would have inherited.
they
Yeah, it was all very
they're
murky.
not far
Yes.
enough removed really that for what normally would happen.
Yeah.
But it's fine because they were thieves and
Yes.
therefore
So basically now Cora gets to decide what's going to happen to them. And she's like, all I ever wanted was them out of my life. So like, as long as they pay back the money, I don't care. Like I'm done, basically.
it's a better person than me because I was like,
Yeah.
send them to
Well, and she
jail.
does say like if the court wants to pursue it on their own, like I'm not going to fight it, but like I'm not going to do it myself either. And so in the morning,
However,
yeah.
her heart is petty enough to want to be the one to deliver the
Oh
news.
yes, she gets to tell
So
them herself.
that's
Yes. Well earned that part. So in the morning, Nate goes to Raymond's office and invites him over to meet the kids. It's very cute. So sweet. And then later, Cora, Nate, and Gavin, her brother, go to see the Carltons. And it is extremely satisfying in every possible way you can imagine. Cora even speaks truth about her husband to them, which because the sister's like, my brother was, but and she's like, your brother was a piece of shit, basically. Your brother didn't even know his own kids. He did not care about his own kids. He is not their father. Like, he didn't even know their birth dates. Like, you're an idiot.
she's like, and then she's like, other people in this room, what are their birthdays? And
Right.
it's like
And
Nate
Nate's
knows.
like,
My
Nate
brother
knows
knows.
them. Yes, she says, "What are our children's birthdays?" And
Yes,
Nate
it's so sweet.
says what they are, and it's very cute. It is honestly glorious. Like, what a glorious moment for
It's a
Cora.
very satisfying.
Yes,
Like the AGA definitely was a good, but like this part is so satisfying
yes.
that
And it
you're
was
like,
so
and
integral to the whole thing. Like, just
like
them
she
getting
wouldn't have
together
been happy if she
didn't
wouldn't have
solve
been able
everything.
to have her kids.
Yes,
But
exactly.
I wouldn't have been happy if I hadn't seen Revenge. No,
Yes,
anyway.
absolutely. Justice. So, the next morning she wakes up and Nate is in her bed and she's thrilled with this turn of events. And he wakes up amorous. And so that is fun. And then later the kids are playing in the garden and Nate asks again about what he missed with the kids. Like he's been asking her to tell him things about like when they were babies and stuff like that. It's so sweet. And she talks about Tess having colic or something, like she wasn't a good sleeper, and he says marry me in September, and she's like that's not a question, and he's like nope, sure isn't. She's like yes.
Funny
And
is that that was their like cover story. They were like, "What will we tell people if they ask?" And it's
September, yeah, so
that, and she was like, "That's not a question." That woman's got the whole plan of what the she's like, perfect. I know. the decor. I
Yes,
know which
right. She
flowers
already
I
did
want. Like
everything.
she,
She already did it
anyway,
all for the September fall wedding. Yes. So perfect. So then we get an epilogue. It's about
it's in
20,
September.
it is, it's about
I
20 years
thought,
later,
but
which is
it's
like a
funny.
lot longer, I feel like, than most epilogues you see, especially in historical romance. Um,
I wanna shout out like the way that she transitioned
yeah,
because it feels like it could be them
like the
in a
next day.
couple months.
Oh
They
yeah,
just got married. They're
yeah.
sneaking into this ballroom that's like
Everybody's already left and
hushed and
they're
everyone's
and they're
um
lovey-dovey. Yeah, it could easily be like, yeah, a couple months. And instead it's like 20 years. Their daughter Tess is about to get married the next day. And they have two more kids.
She and Leo are coming in. Like that's how we find out really is that she and
Yeah.
Leo come in and they're like, oh,
He's got to
I
practice the
can't believe
waltz.
they're like unbelievable. And the parents are like, well, what are you
We
doing
were
here?
alone in
And
our own
then
house.
but Leo's nervous because
He is nervous
he
to dance
doesn't
with
want
his
to mess
sister
up
on her
their
wedding.
dance. And
So sweet.
yeah, it's really
So
sweet.
they have two more kids, Oliver and Cecily. They have family dance lessons, impromptu family dance lessons. It's very sweet. Um, and everybody else sort of heads off to bed, and Nate and Tess are the last two left. Oh, I might cry about it right now. This is another part that made me cry. So that's three times in
Me
this book.
too.
But they have kind of a heart to heart because she's getting married the next day. It's kind of his last. He's like, maybe this will be the last time I dance with you. And she was like, oh, please, like my husband is not a good dancer. Like you're much better.
It's really cute.
And she kind of says, like, should I thank you for everything? And he's like,
But he says, should I have it? She goes, should I have thanked you? And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, for all of it, like for all of
for all
it.
of this. Yeah,
And he says he says the fact that you never thought to is like
the best thing.
my best reward. Like this
Yeah.
means I was successful in my life. And I was just
Yes.
kind of
Like
like,
you never thought you needed to thank me. And that's like the best thing I ever could have asked for. And it was gorgeous. And so
yeah,
he goes to bed. Cora's, has waited up for him. And yeah, it's just perfection. Oh my God, I love it so much. It was so
it's
good.
so sweet.
So it was amazing. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you didn't read it yet, you really need to because some of the things that he says, this man, he's a great hero.
Yeah. Like I
So
have to say that like they oftentimes like we Cora is feisty in ways and but she also like she has a lot of concerns and she is a nervous
legitimate concerns,
person.
even though
Yeah.
she gets more worked up about them than maybe she needs to sometimes.
Well, she's a nervous person and she
Yeah.
overthinks and she does not like she has a burden of a worry, like a thing that's happening that she cannot mess it up. Like she doesn't want to mess it up for herself, but she does not want to mess it up. Like she's got kids that are relying on her and I felt like she as a heroine was really interesting and she was strong in a way that like was I mean, it's so relatable too. You
Mhm.
know, like of somebody who is just like, I'm doing my best, but oh my goodness, this
It
might
might
not
not be
work
good
out
enough.
for me.
Yeah.
Um, and then Nate was just, yeah, he
So
was
swoony.
swoony,
Oh,
so
so
swoony.
good. You guys, next week we get to talk to Erin Langston. We're very excited. We're going to ask her all the questions,
Yeah,
and we hope you'll come and watch that next week.
please do.
See you
Bye.
then.